So as we open today's session, just a vote of thanks also, gratitude to Malviya sir, who is the head librarian, and this beautiful location, our Ashok Goel library. It might be a fun fact for most of us to note that this is the first event at our library. So a round of applause in that spirit as well. Thank you so much. A few words about our guest today, Shivakumar sir. So he is actually an IT professional in the learning and development industry. But what is more fascinating is that he and all his work so far is led by passion in the Bharatiya Parampara. He is a scholar in residence at Indica, a consulting editor at Indica Today, and he has also previously authored a story called Unsung Valor. Today, we are all here to celebrate the anthology that Sir has put together. 10 stories, 10 authors, 10 characters or sheroes, 10 absolutely sparkling, mesmerizing stories of Vedic women through the ages, put together in this book called Aryaa. So today, I would like to welcome humbly Shivakumar GV sir in our midst, and we will open this session with a few questions that I will moderate on our behalf. We also have an online audience joining us, so we will try to keep this session as free-flowing as rivers. And another fun fact, Shivakumar sir actually loves the analogy and the story, the mythology, and maybe even the symbol behind rivers.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, sir, let's open with the expansiveness of the flowing rivers. There is a concept in the preface of the book, Aryaa, that you talk about, which is Satatya. And I will read out the sentence for the benefit of all. Satatya is the continuity with our civilization and an integrated view of the past, present, and future. This is a beautiful, all-encompassing concept. It also represents a cyclic nature of thought. So, sir, with this broad opening, please let the thoughts flow.
Thank you. बहुत धन्यवाद दामनी जी. First of all, thank you so much Sonia ji and Sanjeev ji, Malviya ji for having me over here in this beautiful campus and in this very exquisite library. So, as soon as I entered, my first words were absolutely beautiful library. I just came just like that. And library is important because it's a very culture-making enterprise library. So, as soon as you enter, your thoughts completely change. Thanks for that observation from the preface of the book Aryaa. This particular sentence is a guiding principle for everything that I do, as well as I feel is a fundamental concern of Bharatiya Parampara. That is, there will always be change. So time will flow through change. But time must flow, the change must be in such that we are able to integrate the past into the present. So that is what forms an integrated experience for human beings. If human beings cannot access their past meaningfully, then life is torn. It is a conflict-making proposition. Similarly, if you cannot build the future based on your past and the present, then once again it is a conflict-making action. So constantly striving for this integral flow, seamless flow of time, which is why the rivers are, of such fascination for me. And why is this important in the context of Aryaa? That's what is important. The narrative of the position of women in Indian culture is where this past and the present has been torn completely. Constantly in the modern world, the narrative is that the present is restoring a wrong of the past, especially with respect to the position of women or the contribution of women. Whereas, if you look into the history or literature of all kinds in India before 1800, you will not see this conflict at all. Rather, you will see, women being in every single field and contributing to the civilization. So the purpose of Aryaa is not to say the position of women was great in India. That is of course true. But women have actively built this civilization as much as men have. So it is their story. They're not part of it, rather they're always there. The making of this civilization is through them. So it is this restoration of the flow of this principle of Shakti. That is why I have referred to Satatya in my preface.
Thank you, sir. I think that's illuminating. It's always surprising, I think. I speak on behalf of a lot of people who will explore your work as well. People tend to get so caught up in this divisiveness, the externality of identities.
True.
That we tend to forget this eternal integral flow of time that you talk about so beautifully. And just to pick your mind a little bit and explore this concept that you speak of, that there is a certain deeper spiritual, more sacred call that you are answering in terms of Shakti. Could you share a little bit about your personal background? Because no work is complete without that dialectic.
True.
Absolutely. I was just there in a school in the morning, and there one girl asked me a very interesting question. How are you yourselves living these values? You're writing about all this. Only kids can ask such daring questions. But you're right. 2-3 things. One, as I was growing up in an environment, I had access to a lot of tradition, which at this point in time I had a greater access for whatever reasons. But at that time it all seemed very seamless and natural to me. And due to which I studied a lot of narratives. And I always found that book after book after book after book always portrayed women as having that inner power to make a big difference. And it's not even stated explicitly, it is taken for granted because it's a natural course of things. Like Saiswarupa Iyer, who has written the novel Draupadi, in that, when Draupadi enters the Sabha changes. Until then, the Pandavas are hanging their heads in shame. It is she who comes and restores it. Now the point is, in Vyasa's Bharata, it is exactly this, but our sight is on the plight of the Pandavas and not on how Draupadi changes this whole course of things. And whether it is Damayanti, whether it is, Madhavi, all of them, I found them as absolutely fascinating characters who make a tremendous impact in their context. So in my mind, that doubt was not there at all. There was no conflict in my mind. Not just this. In the ecosystem that I was growing up, women were very strong. There were hardly a woman who thought of, being, subjected to injustice or with a sense of, victimhood. I've never seen that. But growing up, entering college education, I found this narrative to be, extremely distorted, at least from my experience standpoint. Not that there are no problems, there are problems. But this institutionalized victimhood, context. Especially one story, kind of always disturbed me was that of Sati Savitri, who in the tradition is, absolutely fascinating, absolutely powerful lady, who is a hero of her story. But today's Vata Savitri Vrata. Interesting that we are here on that day. So I grew up reading such stories, but but the modern humanities says something totally different, and it is fed into the next generation.
Right.
So it is this, strongly felt compulsion within that this must be changed, for it is untrue. So we are distorting the flow of time. There is this compulsion within me that I don't want to be that generation that did not transfer the legacy of the past as it should be to the future. We are all in that situation. 500 years later, a generation might come up and say that, look at this generation, they did not fight for their past. I don't want any of us to be in that situation. So there is a civilizational responsibility in restoring this for the good of our own people. It's not patriotism. It is because there is something good about this. That must be. Here is the principle of Shakti, where women were strong enough without being in conflict with the rest of the society. That alone must, compel us to restore this narrative. To be in harmony with everything else around you, yet excel, yet deal with challenges. So all these women in Aryaa, so beautifully portrayed by our 10 authors, are all women who faced their challenges, overcame them without a sense of victimhood, contributed to the civilization, performed exceptional feat in absolute harmony by being the Shakti they are all, that all of you are. So it is not just our past, it is culturally, psychologically the right thing, due to which there is anybody concerned about culture and humanity and society and well-being absolutely need to restore this.
That's a very powerful takeaway, sir, and I'm sure that all our young readers present and even listening to this, I hope that we take note of that. I love the phrase that you gave us now, civilizational responsibility. I think we seldom realize that history is being made as we live it. So, what guidance would you have for our young readers, women readers? One is of course this idea of not victimizing ourselves, that is so important, and in the words of Swami Vivekananda, I borrow the context differently, but I love Swamiji's concept of dehypnotizing ourselves.
Absolutely.
From our own self-limiting beliefs, and I think that this is such a universal value that can cut across not just the women readers, all the young readers and old, all alike. So, sir, with this in mind, that we have a certain civilizational responsibility that we must be, aware of and alive to as we go about not just reading the book, but trying to live these values, like that little child reminded us. And you, what advice would you have, for the readers? They will pick up the book, they will absolutely, immerse themselves in the stories, and then what next?
Beautiful question. Something that I always want to answer, even without a question, but you have asked that question and that's made my life easy. If from this audience, 2 more curators come on board and curate 2 Aryaa books, that's all it is. The reason why I'm saying this is that one Aryaa book cannot set right this narrative. There is a reason why the West, sends a stream of series, and you look at a DK series, there will be books, 25 books. You look at it, on a shelf in a library, it is impacting. So you need 20, 30 Arya books. If you ask me, in Mahabharata, every page will throw an Arya. It is, and not one woman from our traditional text, not even not just Mahabharata, any text. Here eight characters are from Mahabharata, 2 from Upanishads. Go to Ramayana. The perception is women are portrayed gently there. No. Srinama says, I can convince everybody else, but convincing you, Sita, is difficult for me. So if you just easily, walk through the traditional texts, you will find 1,000 characters. If you come to the historical era, the Gupta era is one of the most successful civilization making era of India, of the world. India today is a contribution of the Shunga and the, Gupta era. We miss this actually. Whatever else later, whoever else has done, it's a continuation of what they erected actually in that period. From a historical standpoint, ignoring the, past where modern historical data is not available. Otherwise, all of that is part of this only. But purely historical standpoint. Now, if you go into the Gupta era, you will find enormous number of women who have contributed significantly. Not one woman would we know. At least now, because of all this, Chandragupta whose wife and Samudragupta's wife, all that we know to some extent sketchily. Okay, but there are texts of the later era which depict them. We don't know. Come to Rashtrakuta Chalukya era, you will find innumerable number of women who were poetesses, philanthropists, administrators, queens, who all took independent decisions, and records are there of all of this. Now, who will write those stories? Kakatiya queens who fought against extraordinary, battles they fought. Sanskrit poetesses. See, there is a 11th century inscription in Karnataka, which I never cease to talk about. It's fascinating. It's a stone inscription where a line diagram of a young lady is there. She's holding a grantha in her left hand, a manuscript. On the right side, there is a small stool with a pile of manuscripts. And the disc, her name is given, Sami Nirmadi, which is a very Kannada name of 1,000 years back. Nobody keeps that name today. And her description is Sarvashastra Prasiddhe. Now, we don't know what the Sarvashastra means, but whatever it means that the society of that era thought of her as being well versed in many Shastras. It's a big deal. No civilization can boast this. Only India can boast this. And it's not just and that's one village. It's an inscription erected by the society, not even by the royalty. Now you will find, you go anywhere, you will find, if you dig, you will find. Who will tell those stories? All these stories, if you Google, they're all available. Along with original records, everything. Who will compile them all into modern narratives? That is the next step. For that next step, we need 100 curators to come on board. 100 Bharatis, Manjulas who have written these stories and live that passion. So when we announced this anthology, 47 authors wrote actually. So we have selected 10. These 10 authors absolutely share that vision and that compulsion. It's there within them, and that's how they have written these stories. And all of us think as this is part of our dharma narrative, and that is how this book is. And that is the next step that needs to happen. For that, people need to, all the 10 authors are all deeply engaged with original texts. research is something that I as the curator did not have to worry at all, because all 10 authors, couple of them are already published authors and others are in the process of getting published, and all of them have been engaged with respective texts for 5-6 years minimum, 10 some. Now that journey has to begin. If we get 100 authors, it's not at all difficult to change this narrative. For that, a process of engaging with the original texts has to begin. And that is what I'm hoping will happen. In 20 years, we should have 40 Aryaa books. And I should be nowhere present. And that is that alone will be the success of this initiative.
That's a beautiful thought, and it just goes back to that Hindi saying for me, "Boon boon se sagar banta hai."
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, that is a lovely intention to walk away with. Hopefully, more of our audience members also today feel inspired. And maybe, sir, if I may, we'll shift gears a little into the art and also responsibility of retelling narratives. Because on one side, passion is such a good fuel, but if unburdened and if undirected, it may not do justice to our intention. So what advice would you have here, sir? I'm sure we have learners who will walk away from our session today inspired to explore these stories, to excavate our historical gems. What advice do you have? What words of caution do you have for them? How should they mine these gems?
Can you give me one book, please? Just keep it here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Apologies. So just to finish that question, sir, I'm sure that a lot of us will walk away deeply inspired. What words of wisdom and words of caution do you have for us as we mine these historical gems and stories?
Yeah, this is a question of the discipline and the craft. It is a tough part. One objective we set out for ourselves is that we will be faithful to the most original narrative with respect to these stories. For example, Shakuntala, written by Prasad Kulkarni. This story draws from Mahabharata's Shakuntala, not from Kalidasa's Shakuntala. Not just because it's original. So our Mahabharata Shakuntala is fierce, very independent, very thoughtful, very articulate, very questioning. Kalidasa has changed it. There is nothing wrong in it, but it serves a different purpose in his kavya. And Mahabharata's objective is different. Mahabharata's objective is a much bigger civilizational objective. Every story is talking about something very critical of our civilization, aspect of our civilization. So we are faithful to that. Keeping the contours marked by the original texts. Now you're free to reimagine. One. And you're free to reimagine within the framework drawn by Purushartha, Dharma. So now if you keep this lens, to have a lens of Dharma, Purushartha is critical, because that is the core essence. And that will make it very clear what is a retelling that is acceptable, what is not acceptable. This doesn't mean it is constraining. It gives you a very, very long rope, but it still marks the boundary. It will not allow you to create a fake conflict narrative. Minus that, you can have 100 Draupadi retellings, which are all Dharma based, which are all Purushartha based, and which are all, equally fascinating. So this is the, retelling, creative, artistic responsibility that we carry. Requires a little bit of grounding and practice and being engaged with it. See, anything requires a Valmiki to be inside that, you know, to perform that tapas for a lot of time. Many things can grow around you. And after that you will come out as Valmiki. You know, that's fine. That duration need not be 1,000 years. It may just be 3-4 years, and that's fine. But you have to do that. But if you begin, the journey is fulfilling every day. That is the key thing. It's not that you have to struggle and it's not a painful journey. It's a joyful journey every day. I just go back and read the stuff. It's like Sachin Tendulkar being in the nets. And it's fun and joy for him. And you can see that devotion is like that. So like that, being engaged with the text is joyful every day. Because the same shloka, after some time you read 10 shlokas and read that shloka again, it will throw a different meaning. So it is so, joyful. So it will never end. So we can never exhaust what is there in our traditional texts. So given that, the creative retelling, developing that orientation within the framework will be a very joyful journey, and people should begin that.
That's a beautiful thought, sir. This will, I think, before we open to the audience, this will be the last question from my side. What you just said, within the orientation and framework, the journey of exploration will be joyful. It reminds me of the saying that the same man never crosses the river twice.
Absolutely.
We change, and with that our appreciation also of things, of scripture, of shlokas changes. So again, sir, just if we can, have a few of your guiding thoughts, guidance on this principle. How do we absorb the changing context correctly in the retelling of stories and scripture?
That is really the, challenge. This challenge is multifold challenge. One, we have to deal with a lot of narrative that is striking us from outside. So naturally, whenever we look at our own texts, you will be forced to place the cultural narratives striking you also somewhere over there. That's a challenge that we have. Now, if you don't have sufficient ground in your thought, you will succumb under the pressure of the attacking narratives. So there is no escape from developing a strong grounding in your own thought. There is absolutely no escape from that. Because if you don't do that, you will succumb. A young kid told me, somebody in high school, I hated my culture. And it came from the depth of the young girl. But she said that after this, I now have an avenue to develop an alternate narrative. So there is somewhere deep within, the kid knows there is something wrong with this, but is forced to hate because of the striking narrative. So if you do not develop that cultural grounding, you will be swept away. There is absolutely no way out of it. Now, I'll come back to the question's other side. The other side is that things will keep on changing, no 250 years are the same. Nobody in that tradition is exactly performing things the same way 100 years later. Some few things are the same. For instance, the Veda chanting has not changed for 5,000 years. It will not change. That is supposed to be constant. It will be constant. There is no changing in that. There are certain aspects of the tradition. There are certain aspects that must change. So, the fact that Srishti is the nature of Sthiti. You know, it's not that Srishti accommodates Sthiti, Sthiti accommodates Srishti. Srishti is the nature of Sthiti. So things will change. So urban life is once again coming back in a very strong way. There was a time in India where urban life was very strong. We forget that actually. You know, and then we reorganized ourselves into significant rural life. So the urban-rural balance will keep changing. It will never stay the same. And things have to change. It will keep moving in cycles. So similarly, what men and women perform, individuals perform, will keep changing. You know. So this ability to marry the ground reality with the cultural thoughts and frameworks, that you cannot abandon that. If you abandon the ability to recreate an old aspect of the culture in the new context to serve the same purpose, if you cannot do that, then you will keep losing. So that in summary, there is no abandoning Srishti of all kinds. There is no abandoning the roles, responsibilities being recreated in a new context. Whether you liked it or not, if context has changed, you are forced to recreate the essence of the past, but by understanding what is the thought framework of the past. So equations will keep changing, and somewhere in the onslaught of everything, our own ability to recreate has also suffered, and we need to bring that back. And the good thing is that tradition is not only giving us a set of instruments from the past, it is also giving us the thought processes using which an instrument can be made. And if you don't go and touch that, and if you're only dependent on the instrument, and when instrument suffers, you will perish. So you should know how to make that instrument and what are the guiding principles. And as we say, Desha Kala Vartamana, things change. So we should be able to create new instruments for Desha Kala Vartamana. And it's not that they have not done it. They have done it constantly. If you keep on going, if you study the past, Shivaji's era and subsequently, between 1900 to 1950, our ancestors have done outstandingly in, creating a lot of material for the future based on our past. We are not able to access. In Hindi, it is outstandingly present. But post-1947 situation is such that our educational situation is such that we are not able to access. I'll give you a couple of instances. There is a scholar by name Vasudeva Sharan Agarwal in Hindi who's done two things. One is Panini, from Panini's works, he has recreated what could have been Bharatavarsha in that time. What was the kind of India that Panini knew? Now this kind of a study is something that, ancient times would have never done it. But this kind of a study became important in the modern era because of the kind of stuff that was coming from the West. And he has risen to this challenge and performed a modern study. Similarly, he has studied Kadambari of Banabhatta purely from a cultural standpoint. Again, it would not have happened 400-500 years back. It was not necessary at that time, but V.S. Agarwala found it necessary and useful in this century, and he has done it. And we are not doing it after 1947. Because we are now under a different attack, due to which this has gone away. So I am giving this as an example of how the same old approach to life has created a new scholarship, new study, new output, relevant for our times, but absolutely in consonance with the past. Umpteen number of things have happened in this country between 1850 to 1950. We must thank our ancestors. They rose to this challenge outstandingly. It's after 1950 that we have kind of lost this game, which is somewhat perplexing, and that needs to be, we now have to raise to this challenge all over once again. And I'm giving this as an example from literature, but this is there in society. There are societal challenges and so many things. Everywhere there also the challenge better than post-independent.
Thank you, sir. I think that helps recontextualize Arya in a new light, at least for me as well, and hopefully for our listeners as well. We would welcome any questions, any curiosities. I understand that not all of us have had the good fortune of reading the anthology yet. So I had actually collected a few questions, sir. I will just warm the space with questions. Yes, very focused questions from a few of you. Is there anyone in the audience till then who has a burning question? Alright, we'll give you all a few more minutes. So sir, I'll open with this. This is a question specifically, keeping in mind our Rishihood learning pedagogy. How does the book Aryaa contribute to our university's mission of transforming individuals and society through education and practice?
Thank you. One important dimension to this book is that all the 10 women have they all face challenges, rise to the occasion, solve them, and they're all role models to our own times. Some of those challenges most of those challenges are universal challenges. At all times, everybody faces those challenges in different forms. So that is one important aspect. So the stories are written in a very modern language, and the stories aim to serve this purpose of being role models. So that is something that is perfectly integrable within the education system. The objective of a lot of stories is to provide that role model. And of course, it needs to be retold in a medium where that dimension is accessible. So Satyavati, she is a fisherwoman. Suddenly by chance she becomes a queen, an empress. But she navigates that journey outstandingly. And when the time comes, she is the one who is creating a future for the Kuru kingdom. Subhadra, this story is beautifully written by Deepak M.R. Satyavati's story. Subhadra, who is Krishna's sister and Arjuna's wife, mostly we know her in parts, but we do not know that she was the only person from the past staying back in Hastinapura when Pandavas go to the heavens. And she is the one anchoring the future of a glorious civilization, not even like, that moment is as important as Bhishma's death is. Bhishma's death is a civilizational moment. When entire Bharatavarsha stands around him. They have killed him finally, but it's the force of time, and they're all ruining that moment. Similarly, when the Pandavas go away, Krishna is gone. It's Subhadra who is carrying the weight of an entire glorious past. Beautifully brought about by our story writer Bhartivi. So thus, Gargi and Maitreyi, it's their intellectual and cultural presence that also makes a Yajnavalkya. Beautifully brought about by Celia ji and Kavita ji. So, all these stories, sir, they're all role models, cultural role models, and their journey that fight is not a good word, the way they deal with their challenges, therein lies a message and a curation of our own mind. It's that ability of these stories, cultural stories, to curate our minds. That is what is possible. That is what is integrable into the educational philosophy of the institution.
Thank you, sir. I will steal another moment. On the topic of transformation, I think one of the beautiful legacies we have over time is this enduring power of stories, of narratives. And as you have so rightly pointed out, each time that we immerse ourselves in a context, we are bringing that kind of movement between time. We are embracing the flow as well as staying within the framework of that narrative. How do you recommend to us, this path of transformation, because it is a long one, and of course, as young minds, we are very impatient. I think also as a side effect of technology, so many of us, I can see from time to time, the mobile phone, the laptop, they hold such great joys, such great mysteries of the moment. So, what advice do you have for all of us as people? How can we stay the course of transformation?
Once again, a very important question. I will say that this is where India is very rich in the collection of instruments to curate our minds. So it's just that, unfortunately, we do not have that education space. So in this institution, you should create those instruments. It is in the educational institutions that must happen, because that is when you can carry it outside. Loss of education is what is hurting us very clearly. For instance, the mantra is a way of reining in our minds. Now, not having that, denying that exposure in early years is taking away a rich legacy, denying a set of instruments to create your own minds. So yoga has created innumerable number of instruments to undertake this journey. The good thing is the stories are also such instruments. So if you read certain stories, there is no way a young mind is unimpacted by the story of Savitri. It's impossible. Anybody who has read the story of Savitri or Hanuman crossing, the Sagara in early years, the minds are curated forever. They'll be able to come back in the midst of all kinds of destruction. So that is very, very essential. So there are many instruments. So educational institutions need to incubate them and create that access. Right now we have reduced a very rich legacy into a few number of instruments like yoga, the two asanas only being accessed. But it's much more than that. So we are not able to appreciate the importance of the concept of ritual, not rituals alone. The external aspect of the ritual is every ritual. India excelled in ritual design. So thinking of ritual as a part of a design exercise is important. That is another mind curating exercise. So these are aspects of our civilization that need to be brought back into modern universities and presented. Thankfully, the whole universe is now looking once again at rituals with some interest, because you see that there are industrial rituals actually, for whatever purpose. So it's coming back, but we are almost in the following business now actually. Ideally, we should have been in the leading business. So there is a lot of scope. So we need to, but we just need to develop a little more confidence and then push it harder.
Thank you, sir. Yes, absolutely.
This is kind of a difficult question for you. I feel like in India, we are emphasizing quite a lot on mind, narrative, while the physical reality of existence of women in India is severely compromised. So if you look at the rate of anemia, it's one of the highest in the world. Look at the data on pelvic girth of women, it's the smallest in the world. Maternal mortality, one of the highest in the world.
True.
So if a narrative has been built that Indian women are oppressed, it's supported by the material evidence. It's not just someone is just building a narrative that, the situation is not bad, but we are, for whatever reason, a narrative is being created. So the question is how can we address that? I see this is a very important book, and I have not read it, but I'm going to read the book. But for myself, the challenge is how to phrase this problem in a way that we can address it in a very meaningful way. So what do you have to say on that?
Sorry. I think extremely important question. I think this is the kind of question that we need to face and answer, because these are narratives that we need to build. One important thing is that we have to acknowledge that post 1800 has been destruction in India. Absolutely. Now it is significantly the consequence of the colonial assault and whatever else it is. Now you accept that as as a given. As a consequence, many things have nosedived. But we don't need to project that reality onto the larger culture and the pre-1800. The reason being, even when the British came, they came for business and they came for our wealth. And with all these, if impoverishment was so high, we would have not produced a Savinir Mudi. It was not, probabilistically not possible, that is. We would have not seen Chandrake. There is a all of you should know this, it's extremely important. There is a place called Chandraketu Ghar in East Bengal, which is unfortunately today is Pakistan. And that is important because we found a lot of art between 200 BC to 500 AD, Shunga Gupta. Now that narrative is so beautiful that the art showcases women as warriors, all women troops, women enjoying a party all by themselves. These are all normal narratives, not of queens and high-end society. Women, capturing elephants. Women troops capturing elephants. Now, merely ideals cannot create that. It has to be a reality. All over the world, if something is depicted in art, then there is a significant social reality that is guiding that. So clearly, the artistic footprint of India till 1800 is very, very different from the narrative of today. Now, today's situation is very bad. There is no doubt about that. Now, we cannot, shy away. We cannot use the past narrative to defend anything today. We have to do everything to set that right. But we don't have to project it onto an infinity of the past. So we need to separate these two things. And as we must not study the past from the inferiority causing experience of the last 200 years. That is the distinction that we need to make. We don't need to reject an inferior situation in the 18th century. We have to accept it. No doubt about that. But we don't have to, for instance, let's say Uttar Pradesh. kids were dying in that elephantiasis until recently. The rate has been brought down in 2 years. It's just general attention. Has nothing to do. Until then, the narrative was to blame the culture and the society and everything else. And an ascetic chief minister within 1 year has been able to bring that down to such a significantly good rate. So this, if we make this distinction, accept the truth of a moment, but don't project it onto the infinity of the past, then I think we are good enough. If we just study travelogues, let's say, in a travelogue, one of the British Western travelers, he writes that how is it that queens are participating in the decision-making process of the administration of this region? Not even in some royal big thing, in a smaller thing. So if we connect all evidences, then a different narrative comes out. Nowhere any traveler has written that women are dying, at a very young age, in childbirth or anything such thing in 15th, 16th century. No traveler writes. Whereas in 18th century, you will see all of that in a very high value. So we need to perform some independent studies, and we'll need to set aside some of the forced narratives that we have. But this is extremely important. This is really a challenge that is striking us today. And no substitute to bringing our economic situation of today much better. Absolutely.
Perhaps one last question. Yes? Anyone? Right. So, in order to thank Shivakumar sir for being so generous with his time, I will now like to invite our head librarian and convener coordinator for today's event, Dr. Malviya ji. Sir, please if you can deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am very thankful to Dr. Shivakumar, author of Aryaa books, and Professor Sanjeev ji, Professor Sushil Kumar ji, and other our faculty and students. Today we have a great honor that we received chief guest as a speaker, Dr. Shivakumar, who explained all the things related to our Indian culture, religion, society, Sanatan Dharms, and role of women in different parts, Mahabharata to Ramayana, like Sita, Draupadi, and Shakuntala. We read the Shakuntalas in our graduation level, Sanskrit, role of the Shakuntala, says mother of Bharat, and Bharat's sons. That Mahabharata created all this story, everybody knows. We read it in school life. And thank you very much, Damini ji, for coordinating all this event very smoothly and nicely. I am also very thankful to Manjit ji, our creator, who very short time he created this design poster, and very short time, for very short notice, all the students and our faculty members participated and make this book, this talk and discussion very successful. Thank you very much for everyone. Now I am inviting all of you a cup of tea. Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
I'll just say a few words. Thanks to Rishihood University for organizing this beautiful talk in this exquisite location. Thanks to Damini ji for some exceptional questions and outstanding preparation. It was a very thoughtful set of questions. And thanks to that beautiful question, because this is a question that will be in the minds of everybody. And these are the kind of questions that we need to really answer to ourselves. So Aryaa is a collection of 10 stories written by 10 different authors. The authors are Rohini Gupta, then Manjula Tekal, Prasad Kulkarni, Bharati V, Madhurima, Deepak, Rajini, Celia, then Kavita, and Ranjit Radhakrishnan. 10 different authors. 10 authors who are now part of my family. So we're all, we've all spent 2 years, reading each other's stories, talking, and then, it's been a wonderful journey. I look forward to many others undertaking this journey. So this curation experience has been, I know we use the word transformation all the time, but it's been truly transforming to me personally. And of course, all this is happening because Indica has this conviction under the leadership of Harikiran Vadlamani. Harikiran Garu has given that freedom for us to undertake such journeys. So such journeys are available for everybody. Indica books, we bring a lot of books, and these kind of books to your, to everybody. And we have these opportunities at Indica Books to undertake these journeys. So I'm eagerly looking forward to many more people being part of these journeys. Some of our authors are now, were before itself published authors. Now some of them, Ranjit has recently published a book, which is in the pre-order phase. So it's going to be an exciting time in our civilization, remaking so many things, mirroring our own past into the future. So, I'm hopeful that many of you will undertake similar journeys in the future. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time, and I will not hold us back. Please join us for the high tea and snacks. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very nice book. And you have given a lot of narration like
Book to buy.